Hi, this is Serin Silva. I'm founder of Serin Silva Intuitive Coaching. I work with high-powered professionals who know something is missing. They've done all the right things. They've said all the right things. They have the career to show it, but they're not using their intuition, so they're only operating at 50%, even at their best. I want you to head over to Beate's show today and find out how you can operate at 100%.
And hello, fabulous person. Beate Gillette here. I am the host of the Business Growth Architect Show, and I want to welcome you to today's episode where we discuss how to navigate strategy and spirituality to achieve time and financial freedom. Truly successful people have learned how to master both, a clear intention and a strategy to execute that in a spiritual practice that will help them to stay in alignment and on purpose. Please enjoy the show and listen to what our guest today has to say about this very topic.
Welcome back. Beate Gillette here, the host of the Business Growth Architect Show. And today I feel like I'm treating myself. I'm on the call today with Serin Silva, an intuitive coach. Serin, I'm excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So for somebody who does not know what an intuitive coach is or the type of work that you do, will you just share with our audience who you are and how do you help your clients?
Yes. I am a former advertising executive turned intuitive coach. As you mentioned, I combine strategic business skills with intuition. The intuition is there to help clients by bringing quick clarity and understanding of situations. Also, I have the ability to see beyond what someone thinks the situation is, and that brings on rapid insight and clear action steps for people.
One of the things I find really phenomenally important or exciting about intuition is that some people have it and they lean into it, and some people don't seem to have it. But is that even a true statement?
Not in my experience. In my experience, everyone has it. We just choose either consciously or unconsciously if we should access or use it.
You had said something really interesting to me. You said that it is actually a kind of a superpower or kind of a weapon. So can you share a little bit more about that? Because I find it so fascinating. Never heard that in this context.
Yes. So every animal by design has some sort of inherent defense mechanism. For human beings, it's been said that intuition is our superpower or our defense mechanism. So when we're out in the wild, in this context, dealing with something really difficult, there is a built-in superpower that people have access to that they are not using for whatever reason. And so why not?
Yeah, it's so true. So let's talk maybe about sort of how this shows up. I think somebody may say something like, I had a feeling about this guy, or well, I was a little hesitant when I took the job. How does intuition show up in your work? Like, how do people describe it?
I hear a lot of, well, I felt like that wasn't okay, but I went ahead and, I did it. And now I should have known better. There's a lot of like lamenting. There's a lot of, well, I should have just listened to that part of myself. What's interesting about it is that people don't trust it, yet it's inherently built into their bodies and into their spirits and souls, because it's not concrete, therefore it does not exist. But yet, many people say things like, I knew that, or I should have listened to that voice. And it used to irritate me, and now I just find it kind of amusing, because people are consciously choosing not to listen to the deep knowing of themselves, in the spirit of, I've got to get it done, or this is what they want me to do. So we reject our own inner wisdom, our inner compass.
Why do you think that is? Is this something that we beat out of ourselves? Is it that society doesn't give it any value? Is it not in the logical way we are trained to be in business? Why is it that we acknowledge the voice and then we give it no meaning?
I think there are a lot of reasons for that. The one I most often hear where people don't go deep into is, well, that's woo, which is funny to me because woo has no real definition, right? It's slang, and it's American slang. It could be because of, many things have been written about this. And I tried myself when I first when I started knowing that I had an intuitive ability, I started reading about it to prove it, to go to all the books and to go to all the people and look at communities and this and that, the other. And I exhausted myself. But people, I don't know why, other than they think because they can't see it like a pen or a book, that therefore it's not real. And I don't know if it has time from when religion was first developed. And depending on your belief system, people did not want people believing with something within themselves. They wanted them believing something outside of themselves, right? And so,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really what organized religion has done as an absolute disservice, because in the organized religion, it's a holy man, and only the holy man has access to this information. And therefore, you pray to the holy man, you give them your money and your time and your energy, and you cut yourself off. And then this holy man or holy woman is then fully responsible for giving you all the things that you now chose to disconnect yourself from. And the deeper I go myself into spirituality, the more I realize that it has a place in the world, because a lot of people do not have that trust in themselves. But I find more and more and more the people that are coming to me and they're listening to the show kind of know it's there, and they just want to go deeper into it. So I want to go back to when you were talking about, and I want our listeners to really understand sort of the magnitude of your career. I mean, you weren't just at MSNBC a little bit.
Well, I launched the MSNBC brand, which is a combination of Microsoft and NBC, and Microsoft's first foray into network news. Yeah, I've been at a lot of junctures of new technologies and innovations, it just happened, right?
How does somebody like you then go and say, this insane amount of money that you're making, the status that you have, the followers, the likes, I mean, the invitations, the speaking, the sharing, I mean, what happened?
That's such a big question, but so essentially I was working in San Francisco for 20 years and built up an advertising career. I was working for a company that was owned by Hearst Publishing at the time, and I was going about my day. I really loved advertising and I loved my work, and I never thought my work was ever going to stop. I loved it that much. I loved it from the time I was 20 and there I was 40. And I was going over the Bay Bridge in a commute on a hot summer day, and I'd never heard voices before, never thought of intuition before. I was on a well-worn track. I was a demanding advertising professional. Never thought about spirituality ever. In fact, my dad was pretty religious, and so I was very like, anything that has to do with that, I'm not involved, not interested. So I was going over the Bay Bridge, and all of a sudden this voice said, "How much longer are you going to do this for?" And I was like, huh? And so I started thinking about that in my commute. I had about an hour and 20-minute commute every day going in and back. And I got to my office, and I had a really good relationship with my boss. And so I said to her, I've been thinking about, would you guys ever be open to me moving? Fully expecting her to say no. Why? Because in advertising, you have to work locally with your team very closely. It was the time when we were in office, and someone needs to manage. And I was working on a $50 or $60 million account and leading cross-functionally. I was leading about 40 to 50 people. The best practice always in advertising is you are where your clients are and you are where your team is. And she said, why don't you put a plan together and we'll present it to the CEO of the San Francisco office. So I put a plan together. I talked to my husband. He's like, well, I don't know. We've never thought about it because we were born and raised in the Bay Area. So it wasn't like a little thing. We'd lived there our entire lives. Our families were there. Our parents were there. And so I put the plan together. My husband was open, which also surprised me because we'd never discussed it before. But he was open. So doors were opening, which was really surprising. And at the time, I wasn't really conscious of it. I was taking the idea, just pushing it forward and seeing what was going to happen. And the CEO looked at me and he said, he's like, he's a British man. He's like, we're going to lose you if we don't do this, aren't we? And I said, surprising me. So you could lose me if I can't do this, which also surprised me because the day before I had none of those thoughts whatsoever. Sure enough, he said yes. We went to a couple cities in the country, Boulder and Austin. We had an 8-year-old daughter at the time. And within 4 months, we moved. We found a rental home. Everything was very easy. I don't know how to explain it, that once we made the choice, It was all flow. I got the call, as they say in Joseph Campbell's model. I got the call. I followed the call. And next thing I know, I'm sitting in Boulder, Colorado, watching snowfall after never living somewhere where it snowed ever. And I was like, this is a really interesting adventure. And I was managing the team remotely and then flying once and spending once a week in San Francisco. And then from there, I just got the culture of Boulder is very spiritually open, very body centered, very health centered. I was not a healthy person at all, never really thought about my health, always thought about achieving. And so as I went about making friends, they're like, oh, come to this group. We're going to do this. And so I learned about Reiki energy. And I was like, that'll be fun to try.
Right.
So next thing you know, this advertising executive with this commute and all this responsibility was like, yeah, I'm going to do Reiki on the weekends. I'm going to do some energy healing. Never thought about that either. And then from there, I started getting messages when I would do the energy healing, which really surprised me. I would put my hands on someone, do the energy work, and I would just be like, oh, they're not well, or this is going on. And I'm like, why do I know this? And my husband said to me, I think you are psychic. And I said, I think that's ridiculous. Literally. I was like, that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. He's like, well, you always know things. And so I went to my boss, who I really liked her. And she's like, oh, yeah, I could see that. And I was like, what is going on? Right. And from there, I kind of fell down the rabbit hole in a very fun way. And I discovered I just love it. So I went on to be trained as an intuitive. I went through a year and a half program. I discovered also I was able to do mediumship. And then
not easy.
And it just happened. The mediumship, like one day we were doing an exercise and I was like, oh, and they're like, that person's dead. And I was like, huh? So again, that risk, trusting that voice and taking that chance then put me on a completely different trajectory. And I'm not sad about that at all.
I find this fascinating. You know, the one time when I heard the voice was when I thought I had achieved my dream. I wanted to be a music video producer. I finally had achieved, gotten a music video job. And so there's this moment when the dry lake bed in the desert, and it's 4 o'clock in the morning, and the trucks are coming, and the grip is coming, and the catering, and everybody's there. And I hear this voice, and it says, you need to do something way bigger than this. And I'm like, oh, come on. I'm finally doing what I thought I'm going to be doing. And here's this voice is that, yeah, that's nice, but no, this is too limiting for you. And then I ended up running a global business, licensing into 97 countries. So I would like to stay on this for just a little bit more.
Yeah, sure.
So what would you say to somebody who's listening to this interview now and says, okay, I get it. She is this super successful executive. And then something happens and she feels compelled to lean into it. Was this an easy process? Were you fighting it? Were you surrendering to it? Because there's a lot of people right now that are not happy and they have this unspecific, undefined sense of unhappiness. Was that what you experienced? I know this is like a very convoluted question, but I know exactly where I'm trying to get to. So go ahead.
It was a hard process, but also a beautiful process. It was confronting the truth of who I really was and having to shed a well-grained identity that I was proud of for over 20, 25 years. People thought it was a little bit ridiculous, and some people were not nice. And I'm a sensitive person. Right? Being an intuitive, I'm really sensitive to energy and sensitive to people's feedback. And all of us want to be liked and accepted for who we really are. And so there was a lot of shedding. There was a lot of crying. There was a lot of pain. There was also a lot of excitement, a lot of joy, a lot of love. I didn't fully rip the whole Band-Aid off until about 9 months ago. But yeah, it was pretty painful because I think my mind at the time meant you have to let go of everything you've ever been in order to embrace this. And that actually isn't true. This is an inherent wisdom in all of us, right? Mine's just honed.
I think it's an evolution in all the work that I do where I help people to identify or articulate that.
Mm-hmm.
It never is that you were meant to just burn all the boats and then that's that, and then you have to build new boats. It just means a course correction. And that from there on, typically the path goes into either this is the type of person you need to work with because you understand him intricately better than anybody else, or it is a message that is at that level where then people either will bring you in to say, can you help prevent these people that are having these powerful decisions to all
Mhm.
walk away, but to help them implement it and then find more balance and fulfillment into where they are right now. So there's many different ways this can go, but because of that unique skill set of that high level expertise you have, I already know, and that's my intuition, is that this will be an important part of whatever you're building from here on out, to say if it builds on that experience, then what could that be, or where could that kind of go? And I think it's important. Go ahead, please.
I just was going to go back and say the reason why I felt like I needed to burn down all the boats is because people really had a hard time understanding this.
Mhm.
And I was trying to understand it for myself. And I really, as somebody who's really worked hard on her career her whole life,
Mhm.
I had some embarrassment and some shame at the beginning because I was like, well, what if they're right? What if they're right? What if this is crazy? So the burning down the boats was, people were like, what? Like, people were not nice. It's not all about that, but after having that identity for so long, there's pain in letting go and becoming, and also recognizing that's the natural course of life, right? If you even look at nature, things must be shed. And so the shedding process was messy, but so worth it. So I've seen all the ins and outs and the stress of all of it. Now I just have an extra layer of knowing. That's what I call the three wisdoms: mind, body, spirit.
I want to go now a little bit deeper into the practical application of this. Somebody listening to the show now and
Mm-hmm.
saying, I feel like I have some sort of a calling, or there's an activation, or I hear the voice, and the voice is already pretty loud. What should they do?
It's different for every person, but I think when you are hearing that voice, you're at a crossroads to decide, do I want to go discover what this is, or do I want to tuck it back in and keep going? In my experience, I think the universe just keeps presenting you with the message until you want to listen, and it gets louder and louder and louder until you do. It's up to each individual and their comfort level and to listen for what their gift is, or to decide they don't want it all. And I'm here to tell you I respect both. Right? The universe might feel differently, but I respect both.
Yeah, I found that people, when they don't listen to the voice, one out of three things happen. They either blow up their health, they blow up their relationship, or they blow up their career. Because that's the only three things you have to blow up. And sometimes all of it.
Yep. I've seen that more than once. I can also see it when that's happening for someone. And I can see it. It's just, I call it a cosmic 2x4, right? You're just going to keep getting pummeled until you listen. And I don't say that to make people afraid, but there is a universal energy, I believe, that is trying to put you on the path. And the path is usually something way better than you ever thought that you could do.
How can we frame it for them so that somebody who's listening to this now and goes like, oh, my voice is pretty loud, but I cannot afford to let my job in IT go, even though I don't like it. And I really want to do this full time, but I feel like I can't make any money with it. What can we give them based on the experience or your work that you're doing right now to say the universe is not punitive? This isn't designed to make you suffer. But they think that it's not something necessarily good. It's like a diversion, not an evolution. How do we help our listeners to get a good mindset or a healthy mindset around this?
I think that's a great question. I think the question for each individual is really, how do I want to use this gift?
Mm.
And to look at it as a gift.
Mm.
I'm being presented with some information from deep within myself. How do I want to use it? What could that look like? Get curious. Have fun with it. I think, unfortunately, media really shows it as this scary, spooky thing, and there's a lot of profiteering off of that, right? With shows and paranormal and blah, blah, blah. I have a friend who loves to watch that stuff, and I'm always like, it's so funny. It's not real. So there's nothing to be afraid of, because sometimes when I work with people, they're like afraid. Well, is something bad going to happen? Is like, am I going to have entities and
The
all this?
dark
And it's
side.
like, let's not
Yeah.
get creative. Save your creativity for yourself and for what you want to make, build, do, see,
Mhm.
explore, right? And at the end of the day, if the information comes through and you don't want to act on it, don't. It's just being presented to you as an option. But isn't it worth it to just take a look at the information? Just look at it. You don't have to put it in your cart if you don't want to.
I like this idea to say, in my experience, you don't heed the voice, it does get worse, and often with really terrible consequences. So I want to talk about this idea of the matrix you also use, which is why I think we felt so connected.
Right.
It's a term I've been increasingly using. And the matrix is this idea that what you've been told you have to achieve is the answer to everything. I work with a lot of high net worth individuals, and they've been told that if they make the money, then life would be amazing and they have no more problems because they now have money. And the matrix tells them you're no longer allowed to talk about anything negative because,
Mhm.
after all, you have money. So they're being pushed in horrible isolation and despair because now they have the money and they can't even talk to anybody about anything anymore, because then people would say, well, you have more money than God. What problem could you potentially have? Can you give us a definition of the matrix as you're referring to?
Yeah. Well, the first time I heard about the Matrix, I was like, that seems ridiculous. I'll be honest with you. The first time I heard it. And then I was like, I got curious. And I was like, there's almost two spaces. There's the known space, the logic flow. You are born, you go to school, if you get married, you have kids, whatever, you work hard, you have the money. That's what you were just talking about. That's one. That to me is the matrix, right? Everything's already pre-chewed for you. You're going to follow these steps and you're going to get to the money. But the money is not the end goal. The money is merely the vehicle to accelerate, right, where you're going to go. That's the way I look at it. And there's the other reality, which for me is the existing world as I know it, and then the spiritual world that is unseen. We call it the unseen. And it's our intuition, it's our inner knowing, it's our connection to nature, it's our connection to the earth, it's our deep listening, right? And it's our reverence for all life.
Oh, I
And
love that.
so I like to look at it like this, like they're together. But 90% of the world operates in the matrix, whether by choice or by the reality of what they've come into. But when you hear a voice, that is the invitation to listen and look outside of what's in front of you. So if you're a high net worth individual and you're super frustrated, why not go inside, right? Get curious. The outside world can no longer satisfy you. You pushed all the bounds. You played the game very, very well. Congratulations. Why are you so unhappy? Because you don't know what you want inside. You don't know who you are inside. You haven't been listening to the voice. And maybe you haven't been listening to the voice enough. So my invitation to those people is, how can you trust that part of yourself and allow it to unfold?
So they come to you now, Serin.
Yeah.
And now they say, I'm very successful. My relationships, I got some physical stuff going on. You know, I maybe had a test, liver, kidney, heart, whatever. And the doctor said, I need to make changes. It's not that I'm particularly unhappy per se, but I feel anxious. How do you take them and help them understand some of this awareness that they now need to be building to start the journey inside? And is there resistance when they do?
I see this a lot. And sometimes the more affluent the person, the more disconnected they are from their own wants, needs, heart, soul. So they know something's missing. That's why they found me typically. And I recently coached someone who was in high resistance, so wanted access to the information within themselves that we would have sessions and they just weren't willing to drop down into themselves. I think it was too scary. But I really like to look at, what is your aliveness? How alive are you actually? Right? When was the last time you felt joy? When was the last time you felt creative? You can have all the stuff in the world, and I'm not here to judge you if you do, but
Hmm.
how alive are you? So it really depends on individual. Like I said, the more affluent the person, the more disconnected they tend to be from the self. There's this invitation to do the work. And so we talk about that. I will use intuitive tools to try to kind of pry open the muscle, right? I will use somatic practices. I will use coaching techniques, depending on the person. And sometimes I'll use Reiki energy. But there comes to a point where you're at a door and you have to decide if you want to open it or not, if you want to go there.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things, really, what you said to me in the very beginning when you said you would like to be on the show and talk about this, that you said that you felt that draw because I had really started to step into this and talk about this more openly, the strategic and the spiritual aspect of it. So would you describe this as, because I think it's important, maybe give a practical example. I had the same thing, when I was in my spiritual journey, and then I hear the voice, and the voice says, you need to bring in more spirituality in your strategy. I'm almost laughing. I'm a German strategist, and you want me to do what? You want me to bring in the spirituality, and then, but the call was so unbelievably strong, and then I realized I've always really done that, and that people prefer to call it strategy because it's so intuitive for me, but without the intuition, I couldn't be doing the strategy. So how did you recognize that? So can we give maybe our listeners a pointer to say, this is the point you need to really be paying attention to, that this is happening right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for me, I loved each side of myself too much, and I wasn't willing to give up one for the other. I wasn't willing to give up the strategic stuff, and I wasn't willing to give up the spiritual stuff. The strategic stuff feeds me in a different way. So what I would say first to your listener is know yourself. You should be paying attention at a deeper level when you're giving responses to things. One of the examples I'll give people is, and it's really low level example, but I'll say, do you really want to eat that food? Like maybe they're at someone's house for dinner and they'll be like, well, I have to eat it because they prepared it. And I'm like, no, you don't. And a lot of times I'll say to my clients, I'll say, okay, we have to move the meeting. Is that okay? And they'll say, yeah, it's fine. I'm like, is it really fine? Go inside and ask yourself if it's really fine. And they'll be like, no, I actually want to do it tomorrow. Okay, then we're going to do it tomorrow. So how do we honor the needs of the self in our everyday decision making, right? And stop holding the facade of the matrix because we're trying to make everybody happy. Because in making everybody happy, who's not happy? Probably you.
I mean, this reminds me so much of this when you were a coach or consultant, and now it changes the way you approach working with someone. You and I talked about working together, and we know there's something there, but it hasn't been materialized or formulated itself enough. So there's a part about this where, with the sales training and the closing and the ratios and the KPIs and, what's the volume of potential contracts out there, where there's a part of me as a business strategist where I want to go there and then say, were I to close these 5 jobs by the end of the year? But then there's this other part of me now where I go, no, it's just not there yet. It has not. There's the clarity of what it is that we're wanting to achieve hasn't come through yet enough. How do you manage this uncertainty of some of these pieces, right? Because we know that money is a decisive energy, but the development to get there is not always a decisive energy, because intuition can be, but is not always decisive because it's an exploratory piece. How can we get our heads or hearts around understanding the process without feeling, oh man, I didn't close that? How do I get out of that? And do I need to be out of that in order to be in that energy?
Right. For me, it's a belief system. And it actually goes also to how I was trained, which is you have to trust the divine timing, and you have to trust that the work is plentiful, and you have to trust that it will come, the clearer your own voices. That's the process that I use for myself. I have to trust the timing. So for example, if a client comes to me and they're almost ready to sign, and then they're like, I can't because XYZ, I'm like, you know what? This isn't the right time. And sure, that doesn't mean that there aren't realities as far as running the business and profitability and all that, but I can no longer force the matrix KPIs
Mm-hmm.
on the energy of the situation. And that is a conscious choice that I make.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
have to feel comfortable and you have to trust something that you can't see, which is why it's a process and why I have to work with kind of clearing my own resonance within myself. It was a whole process of that and to be able to work to that point. But even when I was training on how to read, on how to see intuitively, it was like, trust whatever comes up. Some crazy imagery would come up and they'd be like, go with it. And I feel like that's how I found you.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful piece and, the perfect bridge for us as we're closing out this interview to say, so for somebody who's now heard something in this interview and feels a call or a draw to you, where should they go?
And go to serinsilva.com. That'll be in the show notes. And I offer a free consultation. I'd be happy to talk to you about the challenge that you're going through, whether it be personal or professional, and then how to increase that inner knowing, open up the aperture so you can start to benefit from something that you already know that you're just not using. I say people are leaving half of their money on the table or half of the opportunity. If you're not using your intuitive gifts, you're only leaving half of your brain. You can read as much as you want. You can listen to as many podcasts as you want. You can go to as many classes as you want, but you are not open to your own divine inner knowing. And there's probably a ton of information in there. So I can help you unpack that, or at least put you on the right path to unpack that.
Excellent. I love that very much. I think that's a great place to be, is that it's definitely a pull. So if you feel the pull, by all means, reach out and make sure you schedule your free consultation. Serin, it's been amazing to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for your time, and I hope this is very valuable for your listeners.
I'm sure it is. All right, and there you have it. And so take advantage of all the tools that we bring you in the show and reach out to Serin to figure out what is the first and best step for you to get started. And with that, I say goodbye.
Goodbye.
So appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for listening to the entire episode. Please subscribe to the podcast, give us a 5-star review, a comment, and share this episode with one more person so that you can help us help more people. Thank you again. Until next time. Goodbye.